All right, so a couple of weeks ago, I brought home this rusty, crusty table base, and I thought I could turn it into a table and, you know, just have that really cool rusted out industrial look to it. And I was going to kind of show you what it looks like. So we got the octagon base here, and then about a 4-inch tube and a little piece on top. Now it was all held together by this rod right here, and as you can see, it's so rusty. When I tried to undo it, it just totally snapped. But anyway, it just goes right through the hole, feeds right through there, down into that hole, and it all just tightens up. So pretty simple construction. And like I said, I'm gonna keep it just rusty and crusty. I like that look. I will clear coat it, but for the most part, that is patina that just can't be, you know, done by hand. It just, you can't get it to look that good. So I'm gonna leave it alone. It'll get a lot darker because I'm gonna clear coat it, but otherwise I'll just leave it as is. Then what I'll do is I'll take some of these 2x12s and I'm gonna chop them down into a tabletop, just a real simple top. And I keep going back and forth on whether I want to do something to the tabletop or just keep it simple wood. I'm not sure yet, I haven't quite decided, but I figure I could at least get it built, set it on top, see how I like it, and then decide from there. So anyway, let me go ahead and start chopping up the tabletop. All right, so I want to make my board, the wood top I should say, as big as I can. And these 2x12s I bought happen to be 6 feet long, so I'm just going to chop them in half at 36 inches. So I'll just do that, go chop it. Of course, right now it just happened to start raining as soon as I started shooting the video, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, let me chop these to 36 inches. Then I want to join them with my Kreg jig to kind of make a flat surface. And then I will use my router and a little template, or a little jig, to cut out a circle. And then I can take it back apart and actually finish the boards and then put them together for real. So anyway, let me go ahead and chop these up before it starts raining too hard. All right, so I got my 2x12s cut down to 36 inches long. So I laid 3 of them together to kind of experiment and see what my top's gonna look like. And I realized I made a mistake here, and I'm glad I caught it now. So I realized that a 2x12 is not actually 12 inches wide. I completely forgot they're actually only about 11 1/4. So when you put 3 of them together, it is not a full 36 inches wide, which is not good. I need it to be a little wider. The reason I found out is because I was messing with my little router jig here, which is just screwed down to the center. I measured out about 18 inches. This has a hole here. There's these 2 screws will hold my router down. And then as it's running, you just drag it around in a circle and it will cut a perfect circle after a few passes. All right, so anyway, I was messing with it and I realized that, right there, it overhangs by a good 2 inches or so. I thought, oh man, I totally forgot. So the easiest way to fix that is just to expand these joints right here. So I got into my wood stash down in my basement and I found this old 2x4, which is pretty cool. It's got a lot of patina. I'm just gonna run it down my table saw, so rip it right in half, and then these 2 halves will be sunk right here into these joints. It'll expand it out, and I think that will give me enough space. Plus, it'll add an extra little detail, because I said earlier I was thinking of maybe doing something to the center board, but you can tell this board's a little darker. I think it's going to absorb the poly and get darker than these boards, so it'll be kind of like 2 racing stripes, which is kind of cool. Just add a little simple feature to it. And then I can join it all together with glue and pocket screws using my little Kreg jig. So how about I get started on that, rip this down, start putting these together, and then I can cut out my circles and start finishing up the top. All right, and check it out. I got it all glued and screwed together. It's nice and strong, and it's actually really nice and flat. I went a little overboard with my pocket holes. You can see I put a bunch in there, but I figure since I'm having these little strips in there, there's a lot of boards being joined, so I wanted to make sure it was nice and secure, so I used plenty of glue and plenty of screws. And like I said, it's actually nice and flat. I've had some boards I've joined together before, and when it's all done, it has a little bit of a bow to it. Then I have to like weigh it down and let it dry overnight, and sometimes it still has a little bit of a bow. I think a lot of it has to do with just how straight the board is to begin with, but also if you look at the end grain, You can see on this board that they kind of curl this way. Same thing here, you can see they all kind of swoop and curl that way. And then same thing here, you can definitely see here, they all curl that way. So if I put all these boards together and any of them were slightly bowed, once they were all squeezed together, they definitely would have been a little curved and you could push down a corner and the whole thing would kind of push down. But these ended up being flat. So I think part of it was just because I chose flat boards. When I grabbed them at the store, I laid them all down on their nice level concrete and none of them wobbled, so that was good. And also when I added these little strips, I turned them so that the grain on these, instead of swooping this way, they actually kind of swoop this way. So that can help too. If I had just joined these 3 boards together, it could have been a good, if one of them had a little bow to it, it would have been a good idea to flip one of them the opposite way. So these could curve under and then one here could curve up. And that could help too. So it's not that big a deal, but it does help sometimes. But anyway, like I said, this one's nice and flat. But I do want to let that glue set up. That's what's really going to hold its strength. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on this thing while I'm, running a router on there to cut the circle out before it's even dry. So I think I'm going to let it sit overnight and actually cut it out tomorrow. I'm starting to lose my light today, so I just want to put everything away, get cleaned up, and then I'll finish building the top tomorrow. But of course in the video, it'll just be here in the next little clip. All right, it's the next day. Glue's all dry, it's nice and strong, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut out my router. I screwed it in, so it's gonna cut my almost 36-inch circle. And then you probably can't see it, but I got my bits sitting out about 1/2 inch, and I'll cut about 1/2 inch at a time, so it should take about 3 or maybe 4 passes to get a total clean cut. So anyway, let me get going here. Oops, something happened and my router bit dropped on me, so it's like trying to cut at 1 inch now, so it's a little messed up. So I'm gonna go over it again. I lowered it to the actual 1/2 inch, so it should cut the circle fine. But I mean, it was working, but at some point it dropped down on me. So anyway, let me keep going here. All right, check it out. Got it all cut out. Looks pretty good. I like that you can see the different colored wood here on the edge. I think it's gonna be a really nice detail. So before I just start sanding up this thing and smoothing it out for finishing it with poly, I want to actually go ahead and lay out where I want to mount the top piece of the metal base. You can see it has holes drilled in at a nice square. So I did earlier, I don't think I explained, but when it was still a square, I divided this whole thing evenly and I drew lines. That's where I figured out where my screw goes for the little jig. But now what I can do is just line up all of my little screw holes to make sure they all hit the line. And when it's nice and even like that, see how it's balanced real nice? I know it'll be right, so I can go ahead and put some screws in there, and then I'll have holes marked for mounting it later. Then when I go through and sand this, I can sand all my pencil lines away, smooth it out, round over the edges, just make it look real nice, finish it out, and I know this piece will fit. So anyway, I'll start doing all that next. All right, there we go. So I finally got it all finished sanded. I started with 80 grit to kind of take all the rough stuff away and round over the edges a little bit, smooth out the really rough edges on the sides. Then I hit it with 120, that smoothed it out, and I finished it with 220, which is usually pretty good enough for poly. So now what I'll do is just wipe it down and I'll poly it up, and this tabletop is going to be done. Then all I have to do is figure out how to put together that rusty, crusty table base. I actually bought some threaded rod that I should be able to tighten it together, attach it to this, and this thing will be done. So let me move on to all that. All right, so I'm just going to coat it with some wipe on poly and satin. I just have a bunch of it. It's really easy to put on. Pour and wipe, and that's it. Check out that color popping. That's pretty cool. Sometimes the pine turns kind of a weird yellow, but this one has a nice, really light brown to it, so I'm okay with that. And I'm happy that this little strip I put in is a slightly darker color too. I was hoping that they wouldn't all just blend together, so I think this is going to turn out pretty cool. Alright, and while I'm waiting on that poly to dry, I'm going to go ahead and clear coat the metal base pieces before I put it together. So I'm just kind of cheating here and just using some clear spray paint. This is gloss, just because I had some. And I'll just gloss it up, probably do about 2 coats. And it's kind of sealing the rust. I'm not brushing it off or anything. I like that cool look. And I actually have a guy a couple of weeks ago that was asking if I had an old industrial kitchen table for sale. So as I was building this, I had him in mind, and I think he's going to love this look. So anyway, let me go ahead and spray these up, and then I can clear coat the top of the table and then do the other side of these as well, and then put it all together. Alright, check it out. I have the clear coat finished. I put about 3 coats on there, so it's got a nice sheen to it, but it still looks cool and rough and industrial, but it's not going to scratchy or anything like that. And what I did on the bottom plate here is I went ahead and attached my new piece of all thread. I believe it was 7/16 inch. And the way I attached it is I just dropped it through about 1 inch or so, and I put a lock washer and then a nut, and then the same thing up top, lock washer and a nut, so it's nice and secure. And all I gotta do is drop this tube down, center it, and then this plate goes like this, just right over the all threads, like that. And once I know it's nice and centered, then I can tighten it down. So before I just do that, I need to chop this off. So I'll drop on my lock washer on top, and then I also have a nut. I'll bring it all the way down. I'll make sure it's nice and tight. And then what I'll do is I'll take a piece of tape and I'll wrap it around here where I want to cut. And I'll give it a couple extra threads up top, but I want it sunk down lower than the lip of this right here so that it's not touching the wood tabletop. And then I'll tighten it down, and then I will just cut it off with my cutoff wheel. And then what I can do is drive this nut back off, and then it will kind of clean up any of the cut threads if they happen to get kind of warped or messed up or whatever. All right, so then I basically just put it back together, just make sure it's all centered, looks good, get it really tight, and then all I gotta do is set that wood top back on there, line up the holes I made earlier when I was test fitting it, screw it back on, and it'll be all done. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, it looks like the threads are clean, so I'll go ahead and put it back on, tighten it up, and put that wood top back on. All right, check it out. Here it is all finished. This thing turned out pretty cool. So we got that top. I wasn't sure how that new wood was gonna look, but luckily I just happened to grab the second board for the middle piece, so it's a little bit lighter than the 2 outers, which is really cool. And then those little tiny extender pieces turned out nice and dark for almost like a 3-tone look, which I think is pretty cool because the rusty, crusty base here is also sort of 3-tone. Got that rusty maroon color, and then a little bit of brown and a little bit of kind of, I guess it was gray paint or maybe a really light green. But anyway, I thought that turned out pretty cool. So it was actually a fairly simple project, just a little glue and screws, and that was pretty much it. A little clear coat. Turned out pretty sweet. Hey, thanks for checking out this video. I really appreciate that. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. That really helps get it out in front of other people that might like to check it out too. And if you haven't subscribed, be sure to do that to keep up with more videos. And if you want to see some other projects I have some here on the screen and down in the description below as well.